While taking photos in the snow, my boyfriend playfully gave me a shoulder throw to amuse his crush. Just a joke, look at your silly expression, haha. That day, his crush captured the most beautiful smile, while I ended up breaking my right hand, unable to hold a surgical knife ever again. Later on, he was diagnosed with a rare disease, and I turned out to be the only doctor in the country capable of performing the surgery he needed. In that moment when he threw me over his shoulder to impress his crush, he unknowingly threw away his own life. Chapter 1. A rare heavy snowfall hit City A, and after lunch, a few colleagues and I were casually strolling around the hospital when we bumped into Kelly, who was taking photos of the snowy scenery. During our time in school, she was known as the aloof beauty of the medical school, her personality colder than her surgical knife, never once seen smiling. She was the goddess of many upperclassmen and underclassmen. "Dr. Kelly, it's really cold outside." One of my male colleagues called out her name and handed her a cup of coffee to warm her hands. "Thank you." Kelly turned away indifferently, her snowy complexion seeming to have a thin layer of frost in the sunlight. We all gathered under a tree for a group photo, so I took out my phone to be the photographer, bending down to find the right angle and distance, gesturing with my fingers to count down. 3, 2. In the final second of the countdown, a gust of wind swept past my ear, and my boyfriend William appeared out of nowhere, laughing loudly as he lifted me up from my bent position and forcefully gave me a shoulder throw. Thud. "Look at your silly expression, ha ha ha." I sank into the snow, and the tree trunk buried beneath the snow trembled gently from the impact, with snowflakes fluttering down from the branches, creating a scene as enchanting as a fairyland. Kelly, in a rare occurrence, broke into a smile, stunning everyone present. Chapter 2. Why is he treating me like this? Intentionally making me look foolish, just to see Kelly smile. What did I do wrong again? My mind went completely blank for a few seconds. As the feeling of hurt and anger surged from within, I finally realized that my entire right shoulder was numb, and my right hand had completely lost sensation. I could only choke out the words. "Help. Wow, senior, you look so beautiful in this photo. It's the first time I've seen you smile in the 7 years I've known you." William took my phone and proudly shared the photo with everyone. "Oh my, Dr. Kelly should smile more, she's so gorgeous." "William, quickly help your girlfriend up, how could you let this happen?" William laughed and said it was nothing, crouching down in the snow and digging me out. "Nancy is actually a funny blogger in private. We always joke around like buddies. She'll be fine." Suddenly, he caught sight of my dull, lifeless eyes, and William's words came to a halt. As he dug further, he saw my severely twisted right arm, and William immediately panicked. Chapter 3. I'm sorry, Nancy. I was just joking with you." My right shoulder was pierced by a tree root, and blood was flowing. I was rushed into the emergency room. The department head and the vice dean had just finished their shifts, but their faces changed immediately upon seeing me. They hurriedly followed me into the room to save me. William tightly held my hand, his eyes reddening, repeatedly wiping the snowflakes off my face in a frantic manner, trembling all over. He was stopped outside the operating room, and in the final second before the door closed, I calmly said to him, "Get lost." Chapter 4. When I woke up in the hospital room, Kelly was speaking with a nurse, inquiring about the medication I received last night. The room was filled with a pleasant fragrance, and even the scent of cold cedarwood essential oil emanating from her body seemed to overpower the smell of disinfectant. Beside my pillow was Kelly's phone, the screen still on. She had posted the group photo of us in the snow on her social media. William was the first to like and comment. "Senior, you should smile more. You look beautiful when you smile." I was stunned for a few seconds. My gaze then fell upon the medical record next to the phone. Whether it was carelessness or intentional, Kelly had casually left my medical record there. I am also a surgeon, and I understood its contents. My right hand would never be able to hold a surgical knife again. Chapter 5. The sound of flipping through papers was particularly clear. Kelly glanced back at me, coldly took the medical record and said nothing. Although we were from the same field and became colleagues, our relationship was not deep. Kelly rarely interacted with the opposite sex, let alone with the same sex. We had nothing to say to each other. Is Nancy awake? I'm sorry. William's voice broke the silence in the hospital room. He had just finished a surgery overnight, sweat covering his handsome face. He cautiously approached the bedside, reaching out to hold my hand through the blanket. I just wanted to play a prank on you at that time. I'm sorry, Nancy. Your parents have already been notified, don't worry. It's just a fracture, and in a few days, you'll have a minor surgery. Our senior surgeon will personally perform it, and I'll be there too. Your right hand will definitely recover. William's voice trembled, like a helpless child, as he lowered his head and repeatedly caressed my fingers. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he forced a stiff smile and tremblingly took out a velvet box from his pocket. Oh, I forgot. Actually, yesterday, I planned to propose to you. Chapter 6. Kelly had somehow slipped out at some point. William's gaze was intense, filled with deep affection as he looked at me. A city has never had such beautiful snow before, and I wanted to propose to you amidst the snow. To make you angry first and then surprise you. You know, that's how it is on the internet. I really just wanted to play a joke on you. It's my fault, I was foolish, and I promise there won't be a next time. But the box contained a very ordinary ring, showing no signs of careful preparation. Do I believe him? William grabbed my unconscious right hand. Marry me, Nancy. The air became eerily quiet, as if I could hear the sound of each drop of medicine falling into the IV drip. Suddenly, I laughed. William immediately breathed a sigh of relief, pressing his cheek against the palm of my hand and rubbing it affectionately, like a playful puppy seeking approval. Look at you, so silly. Using my remaining strength in my left hand, I grabbed his hair and my gaze turned icy. You're still thinking about proposing at a time like this? First, go to the police station and give a statement. You deliberately harmed someone. Propose. Don't make excuses for yourself. You were clearly only thinking about making me look foolish and amusing your goddess at the time. Do you think I'm stupid? Furthermore, you should apologize to my patients. They worked hard to get a chance for surgery, a specialized procedure that only I and a 96-year-old professor can perform nationwide. Now that my hand is useless, who will be able to help them? Chapter 7. William suddenly opened his mouth, but after his lie was exposed, he was overcome with guilt and couldn't utter a word. The quiet hospital room was now empty, with only me remaining. Traces of melted snowwater spread slowly on the ceiling, just like my future, lost and directionless. I closed my eyes and the eager faces of patients flashed before me. How should I explain to them? To be fair, William, this isn't entirely your fault. Accidents are unpredictable. Nancy is still a young girl, she just needs some coaxing. Once she figures things out, it'll be all right. As I heard the voice, I suddenly opened my eyes. Kelly was standing outside the room, comforting William. Maybe this is why I don't like getting close to anyone. I can't take out my frustration on innocent people. Just because he's my boyfriend, does that mean I should blame him unconditionally? Similarly, I won't let anyone bully me. I thought I was hallucinating. What was Kelly saying? William let out a heavy sigh and spoke in a hoarse voice. You're right, Senior. I understand what you mean. Blame me for everything. I love her, I can't be as clear-headed as you. Senior, you care about Nancy too, right? Thank you for personally staying by her side in the hospital room. Nancy thanks you. You should go back and rest now. Through the slits of the blinds, I vaguely saw Kelly standing in front of William. William helplessly rubbed his face and then leaned sincerely and gently against Kelly. Thank you, Senior. Expressionless, I picked up the phone and called the police. Hello. I was intentionally injured by a male colleague. I suspect they're planning murder. Chapter 8. I met William in university. If there was anything that made me moved by him, sincerity was probably his only lethal skill. He was completely open with me, unconditionally supportive of everything I did, like a silly and foolish little dog wagging its tail for its owner. I didn't have to doubt his sincerity, I just needed to teach him slowly how to love, how to get along. But now, I don't want to grow up with a boy anymore. He disgusts me. My parents hurriedly arrived at the police station, and after learning about the situation, they fully supported my decision. What kind of joke allows him to throw his girlfriend over his shoulder without hesitation? He destroyed my future. And then, shamelessly, he tells my parents afterwards, it was my carelessness that caused me to slip and injure my arm at the hospital. Chapter 9. Faced with all my accusations, William didn't refute a single word, accepting any punishment. In the end, it was the hospital director and chief who stepped in to mediate, hoping to keep the situation from escalating. William would face an indefinite suspension, with his lawyer negotiating a settlement amount for compensation. The goal was to avoid prison and prevent any negative image for the hospital. Moreover, my 96-year-old mentor was still in a coma in the hospital, and no one wanted to further distress the elderly. If a settlement was possible, then let him prepare the money. The hospital quickly arranged my surgery, prioritizing the recovery of my right hand so that I wouldn't have to worry about anything else. However, on my first day in the hospital, a nurse's argument broke out due to overtime issues. The surgical department was short of 2 doctors, leading to schedule changes and increased workload. Kelly, passing by during rounds, stopped in front of the nursing station and spoke coldly. Complaining won't help. Nurses are tired, aren't doctors tired too? It was just an accident, but you, Dr. Nancy, made a big deal out of it, causing your boyfriend to be suspended. Don't blame others. Don't mind my blunt words, I'm just speaking the truth. Chapter 10. The people at the nursing station were stunned. Not being present and unaware of the full situation, and with Kelly being the cold and aloof goddess who never indulged in gossip, her words naturally carried conviction. Kelly turned to leave, but I quickly stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. Dr. Kelly, if you have something to say, just say it directly. Don't be so ambiguous. What do you mean by me making a big deal out of it? Everyone, take a good look. It was clearly me who was harmed. If it were any of you, wouldn't you be angry and hold someone accountable if your boyfriend senselessly threw you and caused a fractured arm to the point where you couldn't hold a surgical knife anymore? Justifying it as a joke, an accident. Are you not angry? Are you not seeking accountability? Then you must be a living saint. The nurse's expressions changed. I pulled out a photo of us together and placed it on the table. Dr. Kelly was there at the scene when William threw me. You were smiling so brightly. What were you thinking? Were you that happy? Kelly's body trembled, her teeth tightly biting her lower lip, and the color drained from her face. She was about to speak when suddenly a strong force pushed me aside from behind, and William stood between us, shielding Kelly. Nancy, Sr. doesn't understand all this scheming between women. You should hold your tongue. This whole thing is my fault. Chapter 11. It was Dr. Kelly who said it first, and everyone heard it. If it were me, I would be angry too. Boyfriend must be insane. But even if it's a stranger suddenly being thrown over the shoulder, shouldn't you laugh? A young nurse suddenly spoke up, honestly expressing her opinion. Kelly's face turned pale as frost, her gaze like broken jade, fragile and heartbreaking. Suddenly, she picked up some documents coldly and turned away. I don't care what others think. You can have your own opinions. Senior, you don't have to take responsibility for your smile in any situation. You laughed because you felt happy at that moment. Did you do anything wrong? William stubbornly blocked Kelly, then softened his gaze and walked up to me, whispering. Nancy, apologize to Senior. If things get too tense, how can we work together in the future? Besides, Senior has taken over our workload, and she's already tired. She's not having an easy time either. As soon as he said that, the people around gasped in shock. I grabbed the bottle of disinfectant alcohol from the table, unscrewed the cap, and poured it directly over William's head. Look, there's something dirty in your brain. Let me disinfect it for you. How ridiculous. Apologize to Kelly? You've become such a bootlicker, can't even tell who the boss is. There are some things I don't want to say, but she took over my work. Does she have the ability for that? acting like a hardworking and humble lotus flower. I became a doctor to treat and save people, not to cater to her whims. And talking about how things got too tense to work together. If others don't laugh, she grins with her big teeth. If she enjoys it so much, she deserves to be scolded. Why should I choose an auspicious day to curse her? Chapter 12. The entire corridor of the ward fell into silence. Many people were shocked by my actions, even the patients' families ran to the door to watch the commotion. Kelly leaned against the wall, her expression filled with confusion and helplessness. Her body swayed, as if she would collapse to the ground in the next second. A male patient, unaware of the situation, tried to support Kelly and slowly approached in his wheelchair. Suddenly, I smirked and said in a strange tone, "Let's analyze the situation, everyone. There are only 2 female students from our school, and we both made it into the hospital surgery department. Could it be that I, being younger, posed a threat to certain individuals?" One statement woke everyone up from their daze, and their gazes changed. It seemed like Kelly's two-faced nature had a reasonable explanation. Kelly forced a bitter smile and lowered her gaze in desolation. William clenched his fists and suddenly shouted at me. "Enough, Nancy. Do you have to target Senior like this? How could she be that kind of person? Don't involve her in our affairs." No wonder she was so happy laughing, jealous of Dr. Nancy, right? That makes sense. I didn't expect Dr. Kelly to be like this. The situation became more tense, even the head nurse and director were alarmed. The security guards tried to stop everyone from taking pictures. In the midst of the chaos, the male patient sitting in the wheelchair looked at me in confusion and asked, "Dr. Nancy? What do you mean by your hand being broken?" Chapter 13. His name is Scott, and he is my patient. He has been actively cooperating with the treatment and was scheduled for surgery next week. My condition has been seen by doctors all over the country, and only Professor Ted understands it. He said his disciple Nancy can save me. I was about to have surgery soon. What does this mean now? Can't you treat me? In an instant, the 3 of us were stunned. The unbreakable line in my heart filled me with guilt. William was the first to bow and apologize to the patient, and I also lowered my head to apologize and explain. With teary eyes, Kelly leaned closer to the wheelchair for the first time in her life and gently comforted, saying, "Don't worry, let me take a look at your medical records. I will definitely cure your illness." Scott's eyes turned red, and he angrily pushed Kelly away, saying, "Who are you? Professor Ted said only Nancy can save me. Do you have that capability? Are you just talking without substance?" Chapter 14. Kelly stared blankly at the person in front of her, her pride shattered in an instant, unable to utter a word in response. She bit her almost colorless lips and, under the gaze of everyone, gathered her belongings and left. "Sis." William immediately went after her. "I am researching a rare spinal condition that develops in adulthood. After the onset of the disease, patients rely on wheelchairs for basic mobility and suffer from excruciating pain. Because it involves spinal surgery, it requires precise operation and theoretical knowledge, with high risks and difficulties. The patients who come to me are holding on to their last ray of hope. I have lost my future prospects, and those patients who missed the opportunity for treatment may truly have no chance anymore. No one is more miserable than them. The hospital also understands the seriousness of this matter. They didn't investigate the argument and didn't hold me accountable, but they issued another disciplinary action to William, who was already suspended, and gave Kelly a warning. My ward was also upgraded to a private room. Kelly seemed like she was holding her breath, determined to cure Scott. She applied to the director to take over his case, conducted rounds 3 times a day to analyze the progress of his condition, prescribed many medications to alleviate his pain and inflammation, and promised him that he would have surgery next week. Several times, I was afraid that something might go wrong, so I thought about eavesdropping, but Kelly shut me out. "Don't mess around. You don't have the experience in this area. Follow the medications I prescribed earlier and wait for my right hand to recover before we reassess." Kelly's eyes were calm, her expression as cold and clear as a snow lotus atop a mountain peak. Junior, I am also Professor Ted's disciple, and my abilities are not inferior to yours. Are you worried that I will overshadow you now? My scalp tingled with unease. Even the nurses were uncertain. They secretly told me that the medications Kelly prescribed were ineffective. Scott was optimistic when he was admitted to the hospital, but now he writhes in pain every night, unable to sleep, and bangs his head against the wall. During the day, he becomes irritable and shouts that he doesn't want to live anymore. It's as if he's become a different person altogether. I can't even imagine what would happen if Kelly worsened Scott's condition. I immediately messaged the director, who, based on experience, contacted the psychiatric department for evaluation. After days of worry, I received a private message on my social media account at 3 a.m. Noodle, can I make a wish? I have an incurable disease, and I want to see something uplifting. I privately manage a humorous account called NoodleNancy, where I post funny videos to entertain my followers. The content is sourced from private message submissions, and all the proceeds are donated. However, I only accept submissions from patients with incurable diseases, severe illnesses, or those who have lost hope. I use a different approach to bring them joy. I understand the rules. I'll send you my medical records. It's a rare disease, can you understand it? I immediately recognized that it was Scott's medical record. I ordered glow sticks, frog costumes, and other items mentioned in his submission from a nearby supermarket, opting for the fastest delivery option. I instructed him not to lose hope and assured him that I would release the video today. About 2 hours later, there was a knock on the door of the ward. Thank you for receiving my delivery. It's such a hassle for patients to go downstairs to collect it. When I looked up, I was stunned. It was William. He carried a thermos and a lunchbox, and casually placed a large bag of deliveries on the table. Frowning, he advised me. Are you making funny videos again? You can only earn so much from making videos. Why are you still doing this when you're sick? Nancy, sometimes I really don't understand you. Why do girls intentionally make themselves look cheap? Can't you be more dignified and elegant? Chapter 15. Cheap. So William has always seen me that way. Compared to his elegant and graceful goddess senior, Kelly, I am very cheap. So it's okay to joke and make a fool of myself. I embarrass myself, and his goddess will have a knowing smile. Do you need something? Oh, I forgot, did the lawyer settle the matter? Are you here to compensate me with money? My sharp words deeply hurt William. His shoulders slumped, sighing as he took out his bank card with trembling hands and handed it to me, his voice trembling. Can you please drink the soup my mother made first? It's good for your health. I snatched it and put it in my pocket, not looking back as I held the delivery bag and left. How much money is in this card? Did you have a lawyer notarize it? I don't accept installment payments, so you better compensate me in one go. I found a vacant space in the staircase, put on the frog costume, and started recording Queen Card. In the middle of the performance, I suddenly heard the voices of Kelly and William conversing from behind the safety door. Kelly's cold voice was particularly clear. To be honest, William, that's your entire savings for marriage and buying a house. I don't recommend you emptying your bank account. Besides, you didn't do anything wrong in the first place. Senior, I understand all that. Actually, I don't care about this money. After all, it's all spent on Nancy. It was originally meant to be her dowry, the money for buying a house. I clenched my fists as I listened, ready to burst out, but then I saw Kelly lower her gaze and smile gently, stunning William with her radiant smile. I can't understand this kind of love thinking. You have hands and feet, and you've chosen to get married. Why does the other person have to give you a dowry, buy a house for yourself? It's like you're selling yourself for how much money you spent. I really look down on these kinds of girls, hey. Senior, I understand. There are very few women in the world as clear-headed and independent as you. You deserve. Before he could finish his sentence, I burst out of the safety door and gave William a punch. You really have your mouth full of shit, always talking nonsense. It makes me sick. Since I was wearing the frog costume, I could act crazy, so I kicked Kelly in the face and grabbed a bunch of garlic shoots from a patient's family on the windowsill, stuffing them into her mouth. Eat more garlic. You're so good at pretending to be knowledgeable. When will your medical skills be as amazing as your acting? Kelly's delicate body couldn't stop trembling, and tears shattered and rolled down. Taking advantage of her sobbing, I used my head to push William away and quickly fled. Just as I took a step, an unusual dark shadow quickly passed by outside the window, crashing down to the ground on the first floor like a bomb. A loud bang. Once everyone realized what it was, they all froze. Chapter 16. Scott climbed to the rooftop while I was in the bathroom, and he jumped off from the 16th floor of the hospital building, leaving only a line of words. I'm in too much pain, and I can't be cured. After examination, it was determined that he had a severe mental illness. I can't remember how I followed everyone to the first floor. My colleagues didn't recognize me in the frog costume and pushed me to the outskirts of the crowd. In my phone, there was Scott's last private message, "Thank you, but I have no hope left." Those black and white words gradually blurred with tears. For the first time in my life, I felt suffocated and powerless. It was truly terrible. Sister! Sister! Amidst the crowd, William's heart-wrenching cries rang out. Kelly was the first to jump onto the rescue bed. Her stunning face was stained with blood, and her long hair gently swayed as she stood shattered and desolate. Trembling, she reached out to feel Scott's pulse. The moment her fingertips touched, her slender body suddenly lost strength and fell backward, like a light feather drifting into the crowd, fragile enough to be crushed with a little force. Save him first. Oh my, Dr. Kelly, don't cause more chaos in the rescue. Quickly take her away. The head nurse thundered, and William immediately rushed forward, holding Kelly and carrying her horizontally towards the emergency room. On the way, I stopped him. Nancy, don't make a scene. Sister's condition is critical. I slapped William across the face with an expressionless look. He froze. I took off my gloves and firmly grasped his chin. I just wanted to tell you that this is the first life indirectly taken by you, and you will pay the price. Chapter 17. Scott is gone. Kelly had a high fever and took half a month to recover before returning to the hospital. She looked completely exhausted. On the day of my discharge, I stormed into the office to find the director and reclaim my patients. The director was momentarily stunned, but before he could speak, Kelly interjected, blocking my way. There's no need for that. Given Dr. Nancy's current condition, she has no way of treating patients. Without hesitation, I retorted, if I can't do it, can you? How many more patients will you mistakenly treat to death? Kelly's body swayed, and the color gradually drained from her face. At that moment, a male colleague stepped forward to speak up for Kelly. Dr. Nancy, please don't say that. Dr. Kelly did her best, and she may be just as capable as you are in her specialization. Scott having a mental illness was an unforeseen accident. He wasn't present at the scene and didn't know the whole story. It was only because of Kelly's endearing appearance that he felt sympathy. Just as I was about to respond, the security guard suddenly received a call, informing us that Scott's family was outside the hospital holding a banner, demanding the director to handle the situation. The director became furious, saying, "This is unreasonable. Scott had a pre-existing mental illness, and the hospital bears no responsibility." At that moment, a female colleague stood up, wearing a troubled expression. I saw them on my way to work. They were shouting for Dr. Kelly to explain. When the patient fell from the building, Dr. Kelly rushed to jump on the rescue bed but didn't perform any emergency measures. They seized on this point, believing that if Dr. Kelly had done something, the patient wouldn't have died. Everyone in the room froze. The male colleague who had spoken up for Kelly earlier dropped his pen with a loud clatter. Chapter 18. Actually, none of us knew whether Scott still had a pulse during those few minutes when he was taken to the emergency room. Only Kelly knew. There was nowhere for her to hide from the accusations of Scott's family. Her slender figure stood tall and proud in the crowd, cold and ethereal, as if out of place amidst all the cries and shouts of grief. What did you do at that time? What kind of doctor are you? An egg was thrown at Kelly's face, and a mixture of egg and tears rolled down her cheeks. She smiled gently, shattered and hopeless. William stood in the crowd, witnessing everything, his heartache immeasurable. But like all the male colleagues who shared the pain, he didn't dare to step forward and protect Kelly, not wanting to invite trouble upon himself. In the end, it was the hospital that intervened and sent the group of people away. Before leaving, a little girl from the family recognized me and plucked a wildflower from the lawn, stuffing it into my hand. In her childish voice, she said, "Dr. Nancy, thank you for taking care of my dad's illness. I hope you recover soon." I felt regret for such an unfortunate incident. I crouched down and chatted with her for a few more moments. Shortly after, William, with a gloomy expression on his face, intercepted my path. His eyes were tinged with redness, and after a while, he softly asked me, "Do you know Scott's family?" Of course, I was Scott's attending physician. William took a few steps closer, cautiously grabbing onto the corner of my clothes. "Nancy, is today something you orchestrated, as a revenge against Kelly?" Chapter 19. If that's the case, I beg you, please don't make things difficult for her anymore. She's fragile and can't handle all of this. It's all my fault, so let's not involve others in our personal matters. I stood there in a daze for a few seconds, consumed by anger that surged through my chest. I tiptoed and grabbed onto William's collar, pulling him towards the crowd. "How could I forget? You're the real culprit, and you won't escape from this." Stumbling into the crowd, I patted the middle-aged man who seemed to be Scott's older brother, the one leading the family. I said to him, "Actually, Scott was about to undergo surgery, but due to my accident, I can no longer hold a scalpel." Pointing towards William, I continued, "And that wasn't an accident either. I was intentionally harmed by someone. It was him, oh yes, it was him who ruined my right hand just to amuse Dr. Kelly, preventing me from performing surgery on your brother. I think if you have any grudges or grievances, don't take it out on the hospital. Find the root cause, right?" In an instant, the color drained from William's face. Chapter 20. I heard that William was ambushed in the underground parking garage, his ribs broken. The villain bought him a coffin and locked him inside for the whole night. There was a photo of Kelly attached to the coffin, with 4 large red letters painted on it, "Despicable man, despicable woman." However, there were no surveillance cameras or fingerprints left at the scene, and there were no further developments. Afraid of losing face, William went to seek treatment at another hospital. Unexpectedly, the incident was reported as a supernatural news story and quickly became widely known. The entire surgical department was afraid of getting involved in any more trouble and silently isolated Kelly. Male colleagues avoided her whenever they saw her. I was afraid of another Scott situation happening again, so I went through the medical records of the patients I had in my hands overnight. Among this group of rare disease patients, only Scott was in critical condition, while the remaining 4 were in a stable period and had a chance of lifelong medication instead of surgery. When my gaze fell on the name Otis, I hesitated. I had known him for a year. He came from a well-off family with a publicly listed company, but he had a gloomy and taciturn personality. Every time he came to the hospital, he was reluctant to say more than a few words. He and Scott were complete opposites. Calculating the days, Otis was running out of medication. I took the initiative to contact him and set up a meeting, telling him about my recent accident as well. After a long time, he replied with a random message, "Is being a doctor as hard as you make it seem?" I didn't know where to start, so I suggested meeting in person to talk. The day we met happened to be a convenient time for me. I first went to visit the old professor in the hospital. I hadn't dared to visit before due to my right hand being in a cast. Calculating the last time we met, it was still the end of summer. When I arrived, the professor happened to be undergoing an examination. The ward was filled with various flowers and fruit baskets, all sent by younger colleagues. Professor Ted is truly respected. People come to visit them every day, and this morning, Dr. William even came. The nurse and I chatted for a few moments, initially unaware of who Dr. William was. But when I finished washing the fruit and returned to the ward, I happened to see William sitting by the professor's bedside, talking to them. So, it was him. But he didn't seem to have any connection with the professor? Honestly, Professor Ted, didn't you realize how biased you were? Sister Kelly is stronger than Nancy in terms of ability and experience. She's just too simple-minded and doesn't understand the intricacies of interpersonal relationships like Nancy does. She's not as smooth-tongued and good at pleasing people as Nancy. Don't blame me for speaking bluntly, I wanted to say this back then. Why did you let go of such a gem like Sister Kelly and instead focus on sculpting Nancy, who is nothing more than a stone? But now, seeing that Nancy's right hand is useless, is this heaven's way of punishing you for being blind and abandoning a promising talent? Chapter 21. My mind exploded with a bang, thinking I must have misheard. Who would dare speak like this in front of the old Professor, William? The tone and wording are not something a fool like him could come up with. It's Kelly instigating behind the scenes again. Kelly is always good at playing the victim, making men stand up for her. They've really gone too far. I forcefully pushed open the door and entered. The old professor's face was flushed, pointing at me. Their chest heaved heavily, and their rapid breathing triggered the alarm. Doctors and nurses quickly rushed in for emergency treatment. As I was escorted out of the ward, I grabbed a nearby vase and smashed it on William. Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? The shattered fragments cut William's face, and tiny drops of blood mixed with his bitter smile. I am insane. Loving you has become my instinct, but I can't ignore Senior's sister. Who else has seen the hardships and suffering she has endured all these years? If I don't speak up for her, she'll suffocate. For the first time, I felt an immense disgust towards this foolish man, more repulsed than by any stupid thing he had done before. We waited outside the ward until evening, only to receive a death notice. When the family was packing up the belongings, they found an unsent text message that the professor wrote to me in their final moments. Don't worry about the long journey, the wind will lead you there. Be strong, have confidence. Chapter 22. I answered Otis's call while crying, and he paused for a few seconds before hoarsely saying, "If needed, you can contact this person." Immediately, he sent me the business card of a private lawyer. A nationally renowned legal powerhouse. Sobs could be heard from the ward as William and the younger family members knelt by Ted's bedside, pretending to be sorrowful. I couldn't bear it any longer. Did he think he wouldn't be held accountable for the things he said just because there was no surveillance in the ward? Trembling, I dialed the lawyer's number. Now that the professor had passed away, I had nothing to hold back anymore. Our grievances couldn't be resolved privately. We'll settle all scores, old and new. No one can escape. Chapter 23. Intentionally causing serious harm to someone could result in a sentence of 3 years or more. If there is sufficient evidence of the conversation in the ward, William may also face charges of murder. The lawyer will do their best to fight the case according to my demands. My meeting with Otis was postponed for a week. It was difficult for both parties to find a suitable time. When we finally met, I learned that he was in such a severe condition that he had to use a wheelchair. Nancy, what do you mean you can't perform the surgery? Your right hand will never recover? Accompanying Otis was a young girl with a high ponytail and jeans, looking just of legal age. Otis had a calm look in his eyes, as if he had long accepted the fact that his rare disease was incurable. I heard it was a hereditary condition in his family. The young girl kept her head down and remained silent. Otis sighed and pinched her cheeks, trying to console her. It seemed like he had given all his gentleness and patience to her alone. I heard that Otis wanted her to study abroad, but she secretly applied to a university medical school, ranking first in the entire program, without Otis knowing. A thought suddenly crossed my mind, recalling the parting words of my mentor, who left behind the girl's information and contact details. Her name is Sara. That night, she sent me many messages. Nancy, I know you. The hidden powerhouse of a university medical school. When I entered, the senior students all recommended the goddess Kelly, but I looked at her resume, and everything was mediocre except for her good looks. You have to give it your all. The dark cloud hanging over my heart was lifted a bit by Sara's gentle breeze, finally allowing a ray of sunshine to shine through. Soon after, I received a message from the lawyer. He said the materials had been organized and submitted to the court, but William had a minor accident and was hospitalized. Chapter 24. He, William, suddenly lost sensation in his lower limbs while driving and had an accident. After being sent to the hospital for treatment, no cause could be identified. It was only when the chief passed by and had a sudden inspiration to check a few specific indicators that a conclusion was reached. He was diagnosed with a rare disease, which had reached its acute phase, causing unbearable pain. If there is such a thing as karma in this world, William must have tasted its retribution. With a probability of less than a fraction of a percent, he was precisely struck by this rare disease. And the only doctor in the country who researches this disease, the person who could save him, is me. But my right hand is already useless, and I can never hold a surgical knife again. From the moment he fell over his shoulder to impress the goddess senior, he threw away his life and all hopes of being cured. He brought this upon himself. He deserves it. Serves him right. Chapter 25. After William fell ill, he never contacted me proactively again. However, one day I received a package, a large sum of money deposited into my bank account. He had sent me all of his savings. This disease, in its acute phase, is truly life-threatening if left untreated. So, between accepting the package and performing an act of kindness to save a life, I chose to urge him to appear in court as soon as possible and face trial, following the law. Look at you, acting like a fool. Will you dare to make jokes and perform stunts to impress someone next time? Haha. Chapter 26. The prosecution process was lengthy. I waited from winter to spring, and from spring to summer until finally, on the day I moved out of the clinic building, I received the news of the trial. My right hand was not suitable for remaining in clinical practice. Luckily, my mentor had a friend who was the deputy director of a research institute. He recently extended an olive branch to me. He was willing to provide me with a separate research laboratory dedicated to studying rare spinal diseases. This was something that Professor Ted had been advocating for before his passing, and now it falls upon me to carry it forward. In a way, it can be seen as turning adversity into fortune. The day I left was also the day Kelly resigned. In the past 6 months, she made frequent surgical mistakes and received numerous complaints. I heard that she has been developing an intimate relationship with a wealthy male patient, and she even wears a ring on her finger. But that man is married. Compared to the scenes everyone used to flock to half a year ago, no one cares now whether she stays or goes, or what photos she takes or smiles she puts on. A male colleague pointed at her and coldly whispered, "She's putting on an act, deliberately wearing revealing clothes, with her hair loosely styled and heavy makeup. I used to think she was a pure and virtuous fairy, but now I understand, she's nothing but trash." Chapter 27. As I stepped out of the hospital gates, Kelly chuckled softly behind me. "Oh, junior sister, you've been riding high on your success all these years, but in the end, you're leaving, just like me. Who's really more noble? I used to envy you, to be jealous of you. But now, hey, I wish you good luck." With that, she deliberately showed off her right hand adorned with a diamond ring, delicately caressing her hair strands, her gaze hazy and seductive. Soon, a luxury car pulled up in front of her, and the man greedily grabbed her hand. Meanwhile, I turned around and headed to the bus stop. We started on the same path, worked together for several years, but now our lives diverge. Chapter 28. William didn't make it to the trial. He died unexpectedly. I heard that he happened to be staying in the same bed that Scott had slept in before. When he got up in the middle of the night, he stepped into nothingness and, along with his wheelchair, rolled down from the 13th floor. He passed away on the spot. It was only later that we found out it wasn't an accident. Before the incident, he had been chatting with Kelly all night, trying to console his goddess senior sister and help her overcome her emotional distress. It turned out that Kelly was pregnant. But the man responsible refused to take responsibility, and it escalated to the point where she didn't receive a single penny. She was even dragged out onto the streets by the original wife and had the pregnancy forcefully terminated, left with nothing to wear. At first, William advised her that she had loved the wrong person and deserved someone better. Later, he discovered that she had interfered in someone else's marriage and started praising her, claiming that she was more deserving of a man's love than the legal wife. In the end, he finally understood that Kelly was a money-loving and deceitful woman, far from the pure and virtuous goddess he had admired for 7 years. She wasn't the unattainable, perfect woman he had fantasized about. He was left speechless. And soon after, the accident happened. What a foolish and pitiful man he was. Chapter 29. William had signed a body donation form before his death, and unfortunately, his body was supposed to be donated to the research institute where I work. It seemed to be a surprise he had prepared for me during the time we had an argument. To love you unwaveringly until death, I am willing to give everything for you, to protect you for eternity. When I received the news, I felt nauseous and couldn't eat. But things didn't go as planned. The transportation vehicle broke down on the Cross-Sea Highway. While the driver went to the side of the road to contact a tow truck, the car, which had its handbrake on, suddenly tilted to the left, and within 3 seconds, William plunged into the sea, disappearing without a trace. His family spent money searching for him for half a month, but they couldn't find anything. The court eventually ruled that the driver was not responsible. When I happened to mention this incident while visiting my teacher's wife, the old lady lit incense for Professor Ted and sighed deeply. It's quite reasonable, it's all karma. Chapter 30. Sara joined my research lab in her junior year. She stood out among over 4,000 applicants from 5 different institutions with the highest score. She officially started studying the professional notes that I had taken during my time. Her artistic talent surpassed mine, and she had a remarkable ability to memorize and deconstruct 3-dimensional spaces. This was of great benefit for precise spinal surgeries that require meticulous manipulation. I asked her if her original plan was to study art abroad and if she switched to medicine to save Otis. Sara looked at the surgical records, finished the ribs in her bowl, and calmly asked me, "Master, do I look like someone who would love being a doting wife to a man?" "Not at all," I replied. She wiped her mouth and took out a wedding invitation from her bag, handing it to me. "I love him, but he is not my whole life. I live to please myself, and Otis will only be enveloped by a certain radiance as my beloved." Chapter 31. Wow, that auntie without a hand is a monster. I heard some children shouting from outside the research lab window. Today is the family open day, and many colleagues have brought their children to visit. I followed the sound and saw Kelly standing outside the window. She had lost her right hand. After not seeing her for a few years, she seemed to have aged 10 years. Her dull yellow hair was loosely scattered, and her face was heavily made up. Cheap foundation sat on her dry skin, as she desperately tried to exude a seductive charm belonging to a married woman. She married one of the security guards at the research institute. That man was quite aggressive. At that moment, a parent stepped forward to remind everyone, "You shouldn't be disrespectful like this. Auntie's hand is just sick, and she is also feeling sad. How can you laugh at her? Apologize to Auntie quickly." The group of giggling children quickly stood in attention and obediently apologized to Kelly. It's quite amusing. Even children understand this principle, but she doesn't. She used to laugh so brilliantly back then. Suddenly, Kelly let out a coquettish moan and grabbed the arm of one of the children. "Oh, did you get hurt? Auntie will take a look and see if you're okay. Auntie is a surgeon, you know." Just as she spoke, her husband stepped out of the crowd, his face red, and shouted at her to leave. "You've been unemployed for years, and you can't even cure your own rotten disease, yet you dare to treat children? Don't embarrass me. I'm ashamed." I stood outside the crowd, watching Kelly from afar, while Sara called me from behind to go back and look at the experimental results. The same crossroads. The same diverging paths. Everything is part of the best arrangement.